Okay, I think we're good. Oh, this needs to be over there. And then I need to actually pull up chat. You know, some mornings, I didn't update the thumbnail. Dang, that was my bad. I was supposed to update the thumbnail on that one. Oh well. It is what it is. Maybe I can update the thumbnail while we're live. I don't know. Um, yeah, so today's going to be probably some 0.16 release candidate stuff. I have it in my head that I need to do roughly like two things. Well, three things. I need to do library upgrades for stuff that I maintain. I need to do workshop upgrades for workshops that are Bevy games and stuff. And I need to do some uh, like bug hunting, bisecting work. Um, I think the most relevant one from last stream was is this the Bevy examples one? Where did I put? It was in the skiing demo that I was starting to build. So I think it was this one. So if we run this replace material, then we get basically no replacement here. It looks like the code there actually requires a little bit of an update. It's not supposed to be solid. I forget what I left in here. Do we have opaque for the... No, we have add. Did I not change the shader? At one point I had... Nope, that's one. Am I not applying the... Doing the material like that? That should all work. In any case, we replicated the issue over here. Which I did a full cargo clean, so it doesn't exist anymore. But this demonstrates the issue using 5 cubes. The leftmost cube has the standard material, the rightmost cube has a custom material. The second cube replaces that standard material using a component hook. The third replaces it using an observer. The fourth replaces it using like a user spacebar press. And the user spacebar press works. The observer and the hook don't work. So there is like I need to go through the Bevy commits for 0.16 and figure out when this was introduced. So that's the git bisect stuff. That's for this bug. And also there's a like a pre-pass alpha shader bug right now. So I have a dissolve shader as well. That I don't know if I actually, yeah. This is what happens when you clean every cargo directory on your computer. Everything has to rebuild. We'll just let those build. That's Game Boy game. This is the Bevy 15 game. Docs. This is our like demo environment for the test that we were doing in Blender, because it was a scheme demo that originally had the issue for the material replacement. But I think we're going to start off with workshop stuff because bisecting sounds like it'll be slow and painful. So that is what it is. Why is this not even trying to replace? I forget what we did at the end of last stream. Force field material add. Maybe I re-exported and forgot. I know I copied some code in right at the end of last stream. Oh, the UV stuff. There we go. That's what I did. I think we're using... Why did I name that A? I don't know why. It's such a terrible variable name. This is just the debug material on that spawn. So realistically, the thing we should be seeing here is this. I think it works for the base setup. Why are we blocking? Can we just stop Rust Analyzer? A lot of compiling this morning. Of course, running 3 compilations all probably compete for resources with each other. So that was a brilliant idea too. So that's what the shader is supposed to look like when we replace it. It's kind of like a force field kind of thing. And it's not getting replaced is really the issue. Wow, these are going really slowly for some reason. I know I said I was going to reboot my laptop. I did not. So that's at least some of the cause here. But these are not the ones that I want to work on at the moment. So let's get to here. Let's open a new terminal. Rust Adventure. I think 2048 is probably going to be the... Let's do... I think I have so many active directories and stuff, like active and in progress and other stuff. 2048.15 was done a while ago. Right? Yeah, this was done a while ago. So let's do a git checkout b. What do we call this branch? Bevy 0.15, Bevy 0.16. It's kind of the way I do these upgrades in general. I just create a new branch off the last one and then do the updates, and that's it. Well, I mean, there's more to it than that, but... Ready to do another compile? This is our 4th compile of the stream. We just started stream. Let me make sure that I have everything set up over here correctly. Cool. Hello, everybody on the Monday morning. I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off earlier. Oh, right. I was going to update the... Let me do that while this is compiling. I'm going to update the thumbnail. Hey, Roberto. How's it going? Edit title and description. How do I change the thumbnail on the live stream? The question is, have I ever live streamed before? Okay, 2048 is over here running. That's great. Maybe we change some of the styles and stuff. I must have just forgot. I was doing this late last night. Live. There we go. Save that. Thumbnail now changed. So we've got 2048. One of the things that I realized a while back is people really don't like to do things that they're not here for, I guess might be the good way to phrase it. People don't like doing UI stuff if they're not here to learn UI stuff. People don't like doing, XYZ if, they're not here to learn that stuff. So while from a demo perspective, it makes sense to do like better UI and whatnot. This workshop almost serves the same purpose if all of this top UI is gone. Right? Like, yeah, we've got, state transitions and a button that can go back and forth and scorekeeping and stuff. But one of the things that I've especially noticed with people doing these workshops and whatnot is that a lot of people just skip UI stuff in general. Is it hard to hear? Am I too low? Am I lower than usual, Roberto? Or is it, I don't know, it could be. OBS is pretty high, I would say. So if it's hard to hear, I don't know that there's a lot I can do on this end of it. The audio is normal? Okay. I don't have a lot that I can do. I don't have a lot of space in the decibels to push things up any higher. It's like my peak is like -5. So like there's not a lot of room. Yeah. Hey, Alejandro. Hey, Vince, how's it going? Yeah, so that's one of the things that I like more and more when I do these workshops. Like 2048 in general is not a bad looking game. Let's 2048. Right, like this looks pretty decent, honestly. There are interesting things that we don't handle, such as tiles fading in, like with animations. And like, I think personally that the little animations for like the tiles fading in is really important. But typically people going through the workshops couldn't give less of a fuck about it. Like, so I think like things like these little micro transitions and stuff are actually things that belong in completely separate workshops, right? If you spawn a tile in and you want that tile to scale up to 1 and you want to build an animation clip that will do that, like that needs to be in like the animation clip workshop. Because people building the game don't care. Same thing for like UI stuff, right? Like if any of this takes like this fade down for the game over, for example, or really anything in general, any of these like, man, those transitions with the little like extra bounce once they hit the edge, I love that. But a lot of people just like don't care, right? They're not here for that. They don't care. They're looking for like very basic Bevy knowledge. Like how do you put stuff on a screen? How do you move stuff? How do you respond to arrow key input? Which is really interesting because the two options there are basically like package up the extra stuff somehow, or don't do it. I'd all say let's get this upgraded to 0.16 first. The one thing we won't have is Bevy easings. This happens basically every time, and I think I'm gonna remove it from the workshop this time around. Typically what I do for easings is I just disable it until the plugin updates. Well, let's see if it updated first. I don't think that they've put up an RC release. Maybe they did. Yeah, 15. Look, it's a fairly small library and whatnot. But I think in the grand scheme of things, people generally just don't care. And I think having smaller, more focused workshops is better in general. So this query then, if we're going to query for parent, I think this is currently named child of. So let's do docs.rs Bevy. I'm experimenting with a new browser. Is it bad that you're planning to start with Lua first to get you excited about programming? Absolutely not. I don't even need to read the rest. Like, just if... So, my opinion on learning things, especially programming, is whatever keeps you interested tomorrow is the right choice. Right? You don't need to do anything you don't want to do just because somebody says, oh, you got to go learn the basics first or something, or you got to go learn the fundamentals or whatever they're going to call it at that point. If you learn how to program and you enjoy it, this is going to be a multi-decade either hobby or job or career or whatever it is for you. So I would say if you're trying to get a job specifically, learning things that the companies you want to work at use is a good idea. But if you're just learning because you want to learn, whatever keeps you doing it tomorrow is the right choice. So if you like Lua, right, then definitely the right choice to stay with Lua. You say you're starting it as a complete noob whilst in your final year of uni. Starting it as a new user in the final year of uni was a wrong choice. You eventually plan to use Rust. Why do you think it was a wrong choice? I guess maybe not enough time. Final year of university sounds like something that could be time consuming. Yeah, I mean, like if you like Lua, then use Lua. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And like there are people who build games with Love 2D, for example. So like you don't even need to use like Rust and Bevy to make games in general, right? Love 2D is what is it? Balatro is Love 2D. Balatro was a really big game recently. What else is Love 2D? There's a streamer that uses Love 2D that I can't remember the name of their game. Yeah, I would say like if you like Lua and you want to learn how to program, use whatever makes you like want to do it again tomorrow. If Lua excites you, use Lua. If Rust excites you, use Rust. You know, a lot of the joy in programming that I used to feel came back when I started using Rust, and that's a large part of the reason that I currently use Rust today. I would say that I did other languages. I did JavaScript for a very long time, etc. But bringing Rust into play really brought back a lot of the joy that I feel for programming, which is why I use it. like fundamentally. It's a great language. It has a lot of great features. It does a lot of good things, but really it brought the joy back that I feel for programming. You mean learning Rust is a complete noob while a final hectic year of uni and a lot of personal problems? Yeah, I mean, like, you got to start somewhere anyway. So, like, I don't know that it was necessarily a mistake because, like, a lot of people, you're going to have false starts too, right? Like, you don't pick something up. Like, unless you're like a multi-decade programmer already, you're not going to pick up a language and like try to be productive in 2 weeks. You're going to start it. You're going to start it. You're going to start it again. And then like a year or two, you know, down the road, you're going to start to feel like you actually have some knowledge and like can do things. And, you know, like it takes time. So some of the updates for this workshop, like despawn is now despawn recursive by default, which is a change that I really love. It's controllable, if I remember correctly. It's configurable, but I've literally never wanted .despawn. Like, I've always wanted despawn recursive. So that being the default fits for me perfectly. You'd use Python instead of Lua, but you agree, whatever you like. Yeah, I mean, whatever fits the category for you, you know? Yeah, you were getting bored and Rust brought back the joy of doing new things. Nice. You definitely don't need to feel guilty about choosing a programming language. Like, you're literally talking to somebody who makes like their entire social presence is about using Rust in various ways. And you're going, oh, did I make a mistake using Lua? No, you did not make a mistake using Lua. Use what you find enjoyable. Use what works for you. Yeah. The lightning speed from compiled Rust code is amazing. Yes. One of the things that I really, really enjoy about Rust is actually the zero cost abstractions, but not because I build a lot of zero cost abstractions, but because I get to ignore performance entirely in certain cases to build prototypes of new things and still get a very performant application. Like, I can drill down and optimize it as much as I want to, which is great. But really the benefit of all this zero cost abstraction stuff and all of the base being so performant and the Rust compiler being so good is that I can just ignore it in most cases. How capable is Bevy in 3D compared to Godot? Depends on your use case, I guess. Like, it's fully capable. People build games with Bevy. I think that the thing that people miss the most often is like an editor. I'm sure there are some feature comparisons that will go down into like specific things and whatnot. The Bevy renderer is, you know, very modern and advanced and useful. But you might find yourself like needing to implement a library instead of using something off the shelf. Like, overall, Bevy is a smaller ecosystem. So while it's fully capable of doing many things, you might have to know how to actually do them rather than like getting something from the Godot asset store. I actually don't know if they have an asset store, but you get the point, really. So we're doing an insert here with the ease 2. We're just gonna pop it. I'm just gonna make this change. This change is the smallest possible change I could make, basically just removing the easing. I think that if I introduce the easings again, I'm going to use animation clips. This is something I run into with this workshop specifically all the time. Is that specific library for easings is not up to date when I want to do the updates. And when I want to do the updates is like on main. It's not. Okay, did we change scaling mode to something else? See, what are our errors here? I think scaling mode got... No, orthographic projection got wrapped in something. There's some picking stuff that needs to happen. Let's start with the camera. The camera is the easiest one. Orthographic projection. What do we call this? I know there is, maybe it's just projection. Projection is the component now. Yeah. So projection, orthographic, wrap this whole thing in that, and then we're good. So it's just a wrapper, basically, around the value. No command in world. That's interesting. So it got moved. That's up here. We get rid of Bevy easings. Bevy easings is not something we're going to use. Command is going to have to come in from somewhere else. That's not the import. Where's our impl command? Impl command. Don't want to extract you as a type alias. Is it in the prelude? That would be really cool. Picking stuff, parenting stuff. I guess command is in the prelude. It's not yelling at me anymore. That's a really great change. I really like that change. Picking and parent. So do we do picking first? I guess that's the UI stuff, right? Picking interaction. I wonder where picking interaction went. I think we might have renamed that. I think picking behavior got renamed too. So I don't think you can get to it through the navigation. Let's see. Source code creates. Here's the migration guide for 0 to 15. 14 to 15. This needs to become 15 to 16, and hopefully they didn't stick draft on the end. There we go. Yeah. And then we had the issue with picking behavior. So let's find out what happened to picking behavior. Pickable. Picking behavior is now pickable. Pickleball. So this should have the same constant since it was just a rename, and ignore just ignores the click target. Picking interaction probably also changed. Nothing for picking interaction. Is it just that I need to import it? Yeah. So pretty straightforward. Picking interaction changed to picking hover, picking interaction. And then pickable or pick, I forget what it was called, changed to pickable. And then we've got the new relationship stuff and single. Single is got a rename as well. So the parent stuff is the query for a parent. Actually, not a lot of like hard changes in 0.16 so far. I've upgraded a couple things at this point. Pretty good, honestly. I've upgraded even like a number of shaders, and the shaders haven't really even broken. I haven't gotten to like the deep shader stuff yet. But yeah. Parent component has been renamed to child of. Okay, so we stuck with that then. There was a big discussion for a while around this rename and whether it would actually stick or not. What do I name this variable now, though? So we're querying for all parent components, effectively. Do we have an example in the docs for this? Child of. This will have iter ancestors on it from a trait specifically. Iter ancestors is on an extension trait. Dot parent is interesting. So this is child of dot parent. I'm looking specifically to try to align with the vocabulary that Bevy itself is using for this now. I don't think this is parent. This is targeting, yeah. Okay, so this is a relationship though. So that's cool. Targeting is a relationship, and they're using just targeting query. Child of query just feels vague and not helpful. Child of. What do we name this? This is such a weird mind-bendy vocabulary thing that I don't like. Do you all have opinions? Like if you're querying for child of, that effectively means that you're querying for entities that have a parent or entities that are a child of something. Like it could be entities with parents, you know? Yeah, it is a very specific kind of like attempt to merge the way that you talk about it with the way that it behaves in these queries and stuff. I largely didn't have a problem with it before, so I'm not really the target of this change. I'm just trying to find a way to align with the change in a vocabulary. It's entities for which we're a child of. The query itself is entities that have parents, right? Entities that are children of a parent. Basically, we're trying to query the relationship, right? So we have to get all of the entities that have the relationship and then traverse them. I think iter ancestors is still the right function to be using there. I don't think we renamed anything like that. This is one of those things where like, yeah, I could just make the change and not care about it, but part of the upgrading of these workshops is actually figuring out what things should be, not just what works. Right, so we've got a relationship trait now, and then this is the example that is given for like the new child of relationship. So parent child used to be something special, and now it's not special. Now it's just like a generic relationship. Maybe child entities. Yeah, child entities could work. Right? You are effectively querying the children in the abstract and then getting the parents of the children. Relationship target, and then iter ancestors, I guess, is the best function to be using, right? So iter ancestors comes from the, I forget the name of this trait all the time. It's like hierarchy extension. Oh, did we merge it back in? I think we merged it back in. Okay. It looks like it's actually not on the extension trait anymore. It used to be on an extension trait called like something hierarchy or something like that. Oh, you can get the root ancestor? That's sweet. That's awesome. I like that. iter leaves is not what we want. Siblings is not what we want. Descendants not what we want. Ancestors is basically reverse querying the relationship. I think that's also one of the things that's going to be hard to teach. There's a source of truth component for these relationships. So it's like you put either parent or child of onto the entity, and then that defines the other one, that auto inserts the other one on the other entity. And thus there is like one component that is the thing that you're supposed to be working with and one that isn't. Or rather, one that can be queried but not inserted. I think for child of, that is child of, yeah. So child of is the component that you're going to be working with. And then children is the one that contains the vec, which is fairly obvious for this kind of one-to-many relationship. Like the singular entity is the source of the relationship. But it'll be less obvious when we have many-to-many, I think. So I guess we're iter ancestorsing. It doesn't seem like we really have anything else to go on here. Let's review what we're using this for in the first place. So this is for rendering the tile points. And it's for keeping the text values up to date with the points values. So there's a points component. The points component is on the root entity, I think. Technically speaking, not the root entity with relation to the child of, because child of and child are and children is the entire regular hierarchy. So on some level, we're kind of abusing that relationship and having data on a parent. Whereas we could have like tile something or other relationship. I don't think it's worth building a new relationship here. Just pointing out that there's like a slight mismatch in terms of semantics. So you can't get like the root child entity using parent child or child of children. I need to correct my words. You often abbreviate query parameters as Q and differentiate them like parents Q, children Q. It doesn't feel perfect, but it works for you. Yeah, I think the query is fine. The underscore query doesn't really help us here, I don't think. Right? Like we're not differentiating entities with parents from anything else in the system params. We're differentiating it in terms of like, what is it actually querying for? And I think entities with parents is the right way to do that. And then we just look up the ancestors chain for some points component. We could insert a direct relationship here. So I really don't think the hierarchy is complicated enough to warrant that. It would clean up the logic here though. But then defining that relationship becomes a different topic. So I think we're going to leave this like it is. I don't think there is particularly a better way to do this. The problem here is basically we have like some stuff in our scene, some stuff in our app. We have the tiles, the root of the tiles. We have text inside of the root of the tiles somewhere. The root of the tiles has the points component on it. And the place we want to render that is inside of the tile in that text. So what we're doing here is we're fetching like effectively that text and looking for the points that are an ancestor of it. So from an architectural perspective, I think that's one of the better things we can do here. You do wish there was a naming convention used for components that are not the source of truth, like an underscore similar to private fields. Yeah, I mean they function the same in all respects except for the fact that you're not supposed to insert them. Right? I don't think there's anything preventing you from inserting them. I keep typing parent, children. Like for yeah. I mean, it's tough to surface this information, I feel like. So I see what you're saying in terms of like if this was underscore children or whatnot. I feel like this is something that's going to get better over time though. I feel like we're currently in a situation where we have one-to-many relationships specifically. We also have one-to-one in 0.16. Actually, we have one-to-one. Because we have one-to-one, I could potentially use a one-to-one for the relationship between the text and the points. I think we have access to all of that information when we spawn these texts in. It does require... Where do we spawn the tile text? Come on, tile text. It's like impl in here. Yeah. So we have this hierarchy, which we should now also probably update. Because we have children now. I'll wait to do the children change until this runs. Does it run currently? Did we make the changes that we need to make? Okay, so this does work. My guess is that this works other than... Like there weren't any logical changes. There were just really renames. So everything here works, which is fine. So let's say we got to a working state here. Git commit. Working with 0.16. That is... Okay, there we go. Why did I rename this folder? I don't know. So now we have better things that we can do in the workshop, right? So like this upgrade would work. I think that it would be a little bit weird. Get single mute is in UI. So we've got text query, get single mute. Text query here is a query. We can do single here instead of query. And then I believe this silently fails if it doesn't exist in 0.16. I don't know that we want this to silently fail. So if we do this, then this becomes single mute, and that's the upgrade. I think I explicitly set this in because this is an invariant, right? This is a, if this happens, something went wrong, not if this happens, we shouldn't run the system. One thing that we can do in 0.16 is errors. I don't know that we have good guidance for errors yet. Right, but this can become result. And this is not actually like result. This is like Bevy prelude result or something. I don't know where we put this, actually. Maybe it's just Bevy result. We have a result type alias somewhere. I promise. Bevy ECS error result. So this is just a type alias for result. This is pretty common, actually. Like a bunch of libraries do this type alias. So pub type result, and then you define the type with some default, and you define the error specifically with some default. And then we have this new Bevy error type. So we can do things like question mark here. Let's do the import from here, I suppose. I feel like there's a better place to bring this in from. There's also, oh, you know what? This keeps giving me errors because we didn't actually return the values. So actually, yeah, actually it is in Prelude. Okay. So theoretically this would work. This obviously is the wrong logic, but this would work, right? And then theoretically, instead of doing let okay here, let's comment this out for a second and do a question mark. So this is a regular result, right? Result mute, text span, query single error. We can have a question mark here. And this works, right? And then to trigger this condition, this text query, we would have to have more than one with new game button text. So we have a button somewhere in here that is new game button text, right? Changing all of the children stuff here is going to be really helpful too. So there's a text span with new game. So let's look for the other text span here because I know I have another button that does the same thing, right? So here's this, whatever, new game button text. There's a text span there. So theoretically, this should error out. And it does, and it panics. I don't like the panicking behavior. Right? Like I don't want this to panic. I want it to print a warning. I don't like it when my game panics in general. So the question is, what is the current state of I guess let's go find the blog post. So Bevy engine, not signed in this browser, obviously. Bevy website. We moved the migration guide into the repo, actually. So the migration guides, the release notes, those are both empty. I guess that's for next cycle. So I think we're still in Bevy website for this cycle. So release notes and migration guides. Release notes, we want like fallible or error handling or something like that. Unified error handling. This is like the preview of the release notes for error handling. So when figuring out what the sum total of all the error handling PRs resulted in, this is the place to look if the RC is already out. And this turns into like the blog post, right? So Bevy and libraries should bubble up errors to the user. Gracefully unwrapping with the help of question marks should be easy. The standard, please just log this, should always be an anyhow style boxed error containing in a Bevy error. So Bevy error is kind of like the anyhow error. It is not the anyhow error. It is something different, but it behaves kind of the same. This global error handler just had a PR merged for like a change in unified behavior. I think that was for system params though. This should work everywhere in systems, observers, commands, even fallible system parameters like single. So this shows using .single with the question mark. The question mark currently panics. By default, failures result in panics. It's great for prototyping and it works on every platform without any extra dependencies. I don't agree that it's great for prototyping. I think that's worse for prototyping. Because then your game crashes. So I think we're going to end up teaching configurable error handling quite a bit. I wonder why we made this choice. I know it flipped back and forth for single in over the course of the 0.15 release cycle. So global error handler set warn. Expect. Theoretically, this should already work for us. We would have to put it here. Where's main? Here. And then these would both have to be imports, right? Generate constant. Generate constant. That doesn't, that's not right. I think that might not be in the current RC release. You like when in dev mode, any error crashes. Crash early craft often makes it easier to detect fixed bugs. Not in games. I don't think that's true for games. For example, if you load in a GLTF file with Skeen, which has been the topic of the last month's worth of streams, right? If you load in a GLTF file with Skeen, and that GLTF file has components that don't work for whatever reason, right? Maybe you didn't register them in your Bevy app. Maybe they're just like completely broken components because you somehow found a way to insert bad data, whatever it is. Maybe you picked somebody else's GLTF file and it has components that you don't have in your Bevy app, whatever it is. Maybe it's an old GLTF file. And your application crashes when loading that and you're loading that at startup, then your application will always crash. Which means that you actually don't have the option to run the application and serve the Bevy type registry. So if it is an issue with registering types and you need to re-export that GLTF or something, you don't have the opportunity to continue the workflow because the game is crashing. I think crash early, crash often is not what I want the most of the time working on games. I don't want it, like I don't want it in production because I don't want users' game to crash. but I also don't want it in development because I want to be able to work with the actual game. Like a crashed game is hard to debug, right? A running game that's running badly gives you the opportunity to interact with the environment. I'm on the dev docs. So let me go to the regular docs and see if this is actually in here. Global error handler. Yeah, so global error handler, the PR made it in like 2 days ago, yesterday, something like that. I think that was actually this week in Bevy topic when it merged. This week. So error handling gains more improvements in 18.454, and that's this PR, and this PR introduces global error handler. So if we want to use the global error handler, we have to use main right now, or we have to wait for RC3 to come out. So that opens the question of like, what should we do? Like philosophically, if this is going to be, I don't like that the sidebar comes out when you open it. The whole point of opening the window is so that I have more text size. The I don't feel like this should panic. Like it is an error for sure, right? But if the text doesn't render specifically, so let's not look at this for the moment and look at the UI. This is the, let me comment this out too. The one we're looking at here is actually the new game text. So fine, that maybe that can panic. Should this be single? I think if I were writing a production game, I would not write this using single anyway. This is the new game button text. So it's just kind of a shortcut anyway. So maybe we let it crash. I don't like the idea that this doesn't have an extra error message when it crashes. So encountered an error in system boxes, text system, whatever, multiple entities. But like this information right here is really important. I don't think we have a dot context. So I don't think there's an easy way per se to do this. I think we have to do like a janky right, there should only be one new game button text. And then this runs. Do we really not have map error? Oh, this is text query dot single mute dot map error. Sorry, I put this in the wrong spot. So this runs currently because I removed the other component, right? And then we look for new game button text again. And we uncomment the second one that's the wrong one. And it crashes with encountered an error. There should only be one new game button text, multiple entities fit the query. So it's like kind of awkward. It like doesn't it doesn't quite have the ergonomic wins of the error handling system if we do it like this. I do think that adding additional context here is really important. Usually with anyhow or something like that, there's like a dot context function where you can put in an additional message. That's something that I would really like to see here, I think. So the options then are global error handler set to warn, let it panic, or let it panic with the error message. Let it panic with the error message is kind of like cumbersome. There's broad consensus that the default behavior for failed system param validation should be set on a per system param basis. Yeah, that makes sense. So like single should be able to tell you whether it is supposed to be something that sometimes fails or not. One and only one is more specific. Map error and we log something before returning the result. Then you have two places to look for things, right? Because this is going to panic. I find this hard to read compared to stuff like this. So maybe it's better there. This is the kind of thing I spend a ton of time thinking about for these workshops. Like, there are a number of different ways to do this. There are a number of different drawbacks currently with doing each one. Which one makes the most sense? I think actually this one makes the most sense. It's either this or we iterate, I think. Right? So instead of this, for mute span in mute text query, right? Just get rid of the error handling single altogether because it doesn't really make sense. And then we have to clone this because we're potentially looping. So then this works, right? And we can end a new game and everything works and it's fine. And it doesn't really matter that there's two of them. Right? I think that's the right solution in this case. Because like, why should you care if there's multiple buttons? So we don't do the error handling here. This result goes away because we're not actually going to handle errors. There's nothing to do here to handle errors. I feel like in general, looping over things like that is the more sustainable approach, right? The more sustainable approach for larger games. Because like, why does it matter that there's two buttons there? It doesn't. That's not like a meaningful thing. It's just kind of like an ease of use thing that's kind of a foot gun to panic your game. The ergonomics is bad. You mean for the error handling stuff? I think we need dot context. I think that fixes the ergonomics. Honestly. Dot context is something that's pretty... It might matter if there's zero button. If there's zero button, there won't be a button. You won't be able to hit new game. Right? So, do you need to panic the entire game if there's zero? I agree that there are times for which single and whatnot makes sense. For example, if you're building a game that uses a specific kind of camera view that you have labeled, and there's one camera with like depth and normal, and you've labeled it because that's the camera that needs the post-processing pass or whatever, and you do single on that camera. Actually, even in that case, I don't know. I think there's use cases for single for sure. I think that is not a use case for single, that specific system. I think you're right, Xavier. Okay, so we end up with text. We end up with this stuff. This is the kind of pattern that we have currently for error handling. We could replace this with the question mark, but then it won't continue in this loop. It'll return, and I don't want to return, so I think we're going to leave this for the moment. I don't particularly mind this because it seems really hard to make the ergonomics of like a question mark inside of a for loop with a message. Like this seems fine for that ergonomically. Could be like optimized, it could be better, but I don't think that's bad per se. Okay, so let's commit that then. Remove unnecessary single. And then I want to do the children's stuff. The children's stuff seems like it's going to have a big impact. So really anywhere we spawn. In other cases, it might be dead code, more like a useless system that is executed but never does anything. Like if you never had a new game button and you like deleted the new game button at some point. I think if you delete the new game button, you also delete the component for the new game button, right? And if you delete the component for the new game button, then all of those systems light up for the compilation. So really those systems are not dead code in the sense that it will query nothing forever. It's a component that isn't being used, which actually is, I think, discoverable. But yeah. Yeah, I think that I want to give people good patterns, but giving people patterns that work for small games and giving people patterns that work for large projects are not necessarily the same thing. A lot of people really like using dot single, and they're fine with panicking, right? The for loop, I think, is a better approach to building systems that don't break over time. But if you truly only expect a single thing, then yeah, single is fine. So let's look at spawn. I think one of the reasons I have this spawn impl command is because we had a hard time doing hierarchy stuff previously. So it'll be interesting to see if we can clean that up a little bit. So let's start here with something that's fairly simple. It's one level. So in this case, we have spawn with a sprite, right? And children that have the board tiles. So instead of with children, we can bring up the migration guide too. Assuming that I didn't get rid of it. I'm trying a new browser out too. I think I like it in general for presentation purposes, but I haven't gotten used to the workflow yet. So a bunch of child-related things, hierarchy-related things got changed. There's nothing really here for the new children macro. Did I just get rid of the... Bevy engine, website. I should have kept this open. 16 release notes. And then we're looking for relationships, I guess. This is like relationships non-fragmenting, one to many. I guess we have to go to the PR. The release notes aren't written yet. Retained rendering, yada yada. Relationships. That's required components. Why can't I find relationships? What is going on here? Oh, I'm in the website repo. Rip. Ripperonis. Relationship. Closed. One to many relationships. One to one relationships. One. Wow, we had a lot of relationship stuff since this PR went in, didn't we? Relationships are huge for 0.16, I think. No, this was the improved spawning API PR. It wasn't the relationships PR. This is why release notes are really useful, because otherwise other people have to do what I'm doing right now. And most of them don't know what the PR names are. So this is the new syntax, like this. There's also a spawn iter trait. So we'll use the specific like children here, probably. We might need to use children spawn. I actually don't know if the children macro can handle spawn iter. I think spawnable list isn't implemented for iters these days. Spawnable list for a bunch of tuples. For spawn, for vec. Vec was fairly new, and then for spawn iter. And spawn iter is an iterator of like bundles. So we should be good. So I think taking this, right, this is going to be here at the end. This is going to be out. This is going to be moved down. And we're going to put children here. So we'll do this, this, this. save. So children. And then I don't think we need the spawn here. Let's take a look at the syntax again. We might need a spawn iter inside of children there. Let's do this approach first, and then I'll move backwards to the macro. So this is children spawn iter. And this doesn't need to be that. Spawn iter might need to come in. Builder doesn't exist. So we end up with this. Maybe this is board.tiles.map or .iter. I think this is an iterator already, if I remember correctly. And then this will be tile. And we need this outside of that curly brackets. And then the question is, what does the compiler have to say about this? It wants us to move here. May outlive borrow value tile. This is an iterator. It would be easier for people who run into something like this to not work with iterators. I think I made tiles an iterator. I think that will drop down to the non-borrowed version, because most of the people going through this probably aren't going to know how to debug this offhand, and using the owned data like fixes that. Right? I guess we could technically like is cloned not available on that iterator? Map exists for cloned, but its trait bounds were not satisfied. Probably just a reference. Expected reference found. Tuple. Tiles, if I check the thing here, is actually owned data. So many parens, your brain goes into Lisp mode. Yeah. So the issue here is we're using board inside of this. And this kind of like goes somewhere else, so to speak. Which is interesting, because we technically don't have that issue unless there are like 30 issues open in the 0 to 16 milestone. You wonder why there's a release candidate. You expect 0 to 16 to arrive in 1 to 2 months. Do you have any familiarity with the previous release cycles? That makes me think like this is the first time that you've looked at the milestones. I expect a release of 0.16 in 1 to 2 weeks, not months. Release candidates are, yeah, like Xavier's saying, release candidates are out for people to discover issues, for ecosystem libraries to start porting early before the stable release, because people get very frustrated with Bevy doing a major release and then the ecosystem not being up to date. So this is kind of like pushing the release back to give ecosystem library authors time to update. I don't think that the number of issues is a particularly good metric for like how a release candidate is going. See, issues, milestones, 0.16. Yeah, 38 open. Some rendering stuff. I think most of this is actually rendering stuff. Is there a way to get rid of rendering issues in this? Anyway, there's a couple of like rendering bugs in terms of rendering wireframes or specific cases of like material replacement in a hook or something like that not working. But nothing that is like totally breaking. Like there's nothing that's going to need 2 months of deliberation. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, most of these are rendering. Did somebody leave a comment on this? Is there a PR for this? For some reason, this is also fixed by 18631. Not the best comment to get, but I am happy with the fix. So like this happens too, right? Like one PR will fix a couple of different issues. Super excited that has a fix, honestly. But I wouldn't worry too much about the number of... I don't know how to work with this browser. I'm trying to go back, and I guess I opened a new tab. Okay. So now I can go back from here. Like improved documentation is a ticket, but that's not like release. Well, it's release blocking for Bevy, but it's not like if the release went out, things would be broken. That was quick. Yeah, for the fix. I expect that during the release candidate process, everybody's focused pretty much on fixing bugs like this, especially rendering. So that tends to be what happens over the next like 2 weeks. Things that are 0.16 bugs get fixed pretty quickly. Big features aren't making it in right now. Yeah, like upgrade to glam, not a super heavy PR. So like these are all small bug fixes. They aren't parallelized benchmarks or bottlenecks, I guess. Display instead of debug in the default error handler. Like none of these are, oh my God, the release is broken. Like there are things to fix, but they're not, it's not going to take 2 months to fix those issues. And specifically the issue count is a bad metric for figuring that out. Okay, so the issue here is board. Which is unfortunate. I wonder... Cloning this is not actually that costly at all, and we don't actually care, so we could clone it. Right? Board itself is 3 F32s and a U16. This is like effectively a color, right? It's effectively a VEC4 F32. So very much not concerned about cloning there. Don't love that this error is going to pop up for people if they try to do it themselves. I know we can fix this by doing a for loop. I know that there's a bunch of people that go through these workshops that are more comfortable with for loops than they are with things like .map. we saved this, right? So the up-to-date error is actually this. Board is a reference that is only valid in the function body, has type whatever. Spawn iter and a moved closure means that it kind of like takes that away. We could clone and pass it in, that would fix it. Yes, the problem is the usage of board inside the move function. But I'm not debating the fix so much as I'm debating this is a workshop for people to work through. And I think that most people going through this particular workshop are probably on the earlier end of their Rust career. So does that mean that somebody is going to be able to go through this workshop, hit this error, and debug it? And I think the answer is no for early career Rust developers. I think that understanding what's going on here, like while it could make a good lesson, isn't really what people are in this particular workshop for. So that's what I'm debating. I'm debating changing this to a form that won't have this error to pop up so that people going through the workshop won't have to deal with it. Right. And while I'm doing that, I'm kind of like making sure that all of the errors that are going to pop up in this case are the errors that I expect them to be. So I think the answer for that is that this is going to be better done as a loop. Right. If we bring this out, then we don't need to do the closure like that. And we don't need to do spawn iter here, so we don't need to introduce that concept. And then I think we actually also get to use the children macro like this. Actually, I don't know if we get to use the children macro. The children macro with a pre-existing vec feels very weird. We'll have to figure that out. We can do children spawn. So for tile in paste, please. Thank you. That was like a multi-second paste operation. Right, and then we get tiles.push like this thing. And we basically just build up this vec, and then that whole problem goes away. People who are newer to Rust don't even have to deal with it, et cetera, right? Like, I think there's a time and a place to show how to fix that issue. I don't think this is it. I think there are other places that it's better to teach that kind of stuff. I think that teaching that here will make people who aren't used to seeing that kind of error just think it's a bad API and not think that there's something to learn. So 2048 still working, right? Command spawn sprite children tiles. Tiles here is this vec. This doesn't, but the new problem of memory allocations that can be optimized away. The characterization of that as a problem is really, it's not a problem, right? Yes, there is memory allocation happening here. We are collecting into a vec and then putting that vec in. That is not actually a problem though. The reason that's not a problem is because the maximum number of tiles we're spawning is 16. And this is basically creating, 16 tiles. 16 tiles, if you are concerned about 16 tiles worth of memory allocation, I think you have bigger problems. Right? Now, if we were going to do 50 million tiles, you know, if we were going to do 1 million dynamically updating tiles, sure. We're doing 16 tiles though. I think that it's a reasonable assumption to be like, hey, this is 16 tiles. Just push it into the vec and be done with it. There's no reason to over optimize this for that, just because it's recognizable that there is memory allocation here. We could also change how this works, right? This doesn't necessarily need to be a function on board. Yeah, 16 tiles on a function that only runs like once in a while, right? This happens to be setup. So actually this is, 2 tiles? Right, tiles, board.tiles. Oh, this is actually all the grid tiles. Yeah, this runs once on setup at all, right? This is the background tiles. So we'll do this again when we're spawning the actual tiles probably, but yeah, just not important in terms of memory allocation unless you're trying to run on something that is like an extremely constrained device, which is now possible in 0.16, but not something that I'm interested in teaching in this workshop. So I think this is fine. Your problem is not the memory consumption, but the performance. Alloc is slow with capacity, would at least guarantee a single alloc, but once again, details. I mean, we could do with alloc, right? Like we could do a vec whatever here, right? Vec with capacity, whatever this capacity is, 16 times whatever it is. I don't think that it matters. Right? Pushing into a vec 16 times, I just don't think that's going to show up in any profiling, If we were doing it way, 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 way more, yes, definitely. I mean, they're correctly pointing out, Xavier is correctly pointing out that there is memory allocation here and that we are pushing into a vec incrementally. Those are both things that are happening here. And there are both things that don't necessarily need to happen here. I think that the person who is going through this workshop both probably doesn't understand the value of with capacity yet, probably can't debug that error, and the reallocation here, just doesn't matter. I think that we could potentially change this. I could come up with a new version of it that that uses the proper API or whatever. But I think that for most people who are probably coming from a language like Python, probably coming from a language like JavaScript, right? They are expecting to be able to create a vec and push into it. They are not expecting anything else. And in this case, it doesn't matter. Right? If they end up writing code in the future where it does matter, then it will show up in their program being, slow, which they can then profile and, learn at the time. I don't think for this use case it matters. That said, we've got more children to do here. More children macro to apply. So here's another example. This is a single, so spawn tile. This is a single tile. We spawn, sprite, transform, state scoped, etc. You agree your thoughts are performance oriented and non-performance related part of the code, so your thoughts are pretty much useless. I wouldn't call them useless, Xavier. I think they are correct, actually. They are worth considering, truly, for the workshop. Like, should that be a concern at that point in the workshop is a valid question, right? And it's something that I actually consider all the time. Is this the right time to introduce that concept? Is this the right time to do that? I think in this case, the answer is no. But that doesn't mean the answer is always no. So this then, I think all of this just goes away and drops into here, right? This is the wrong spot for that to be. It is easy to scare new people away. Well, it's easy to overwhelm people with things they don't care about when they're trying to learn something specific. Is really what it is, right? It's not necessarily that they need to not be scared away, but somebody going through this workshop is trying to do like a very specific thing usually. I think that over the course of developing educational content, there is a time and place for holistic, does everything, explains the interconnections style content. But for most people, they are trying to figure out, what does a game in Bevy even actually look like? Right? So their concern is nowhere near, their concern is nowhere near the performance of this, right? You're not scared. You're not new to it either, Xavier. You don't have to apologize for saying things like this either. Like I want to be very clear that like the things that you bring up in stream are very much appreciated. They are valid questions, and you are right. Right? There are allocations there. There is reallocation, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So there are valid questions and valid concerns. I think in this case specifically, that is not something that we are going to tackle, which is actually one of the tough things about creating educational content. Figuring out when do you tackle things, because you can't tackle everything all the time. If you do everything all the time, then not only do all of the workshops start to meld into like the same workshop more or less, but they also distract people from what they're trying to figure out. And I think the point of this workshop is not performance oriented. I think if I'm going to focus on performance in general, I'm probably going to do different performance oriented workshops and introduce profiling, right? Because one of the things that I don't want to get people into the habit of is doing things for performance without measuring. I think that's really important. So anytime that I'm like, hey, you should, pre-allocate this vec or whatever, I want to actually prove that there is something happening, make the change, and then prove that it's no longer happening. Right? Why is this not? The little AC unit isn't working. So actually, I do like this children macro in general. Hey, welcome to the Game Design with Bevy workshop. First topic, transistors. I hope you all went out and did your homework last night to find your silicon, because we're going to start baking today. Hey, print is on. That reminds me. One of the things that I do want to do is start getting some PCBs printed. One thing that I didn't do is run this test. We haven't run the test in 0.16 yet. Test is passing, so assuming that this is still all valid. It was a fairly simple test, so not too concerned about it. This test is also, how do I say this? I think the test is included where, for example, the performance stuff was not. We haven't tested everything, right? We haven't tested all of the logic for this application, but this is one lesson. And I think that testing in video games is something that is missing basically everywhere, right? So introducing one test and running like an integration test for the game is useful. It also, in this workshop, is used very specifically for the win condition. So to test the gameplay, you can just spam arrows, right? Cargo run here, not test. So to test gameplay, to test this, that the score increases, you can just like spam arrows. I can go like, okay, this should upgrade by, what is it? 32, 36, right? So we get 140. Yeah, it went up by 36. Cool. End game, new game. But like to win 2048, right? Or to like lose 2048, you have to fill up this entire board. And filling up the entire board is like kind of really annoying to do by hand. You have to play so many moves. You have to do it repeatedly and consistently, which makes it a great candidate for a test. If you say, hey, there are tiles on the board, none of them are matching, and the entire board is filled, what happens next? The game should end. So I think testing is very much missing from most games. And I think testing specifically conditions that are hard to manually test is valuable. So that's why the test exists here. Do we have any other spawns in this? Do we really only have 2 spawns? Spawn, 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 trigger, spawn. This is a spawn with children. This is a spawn. I'm gonna get rid of the unused. And then we go to the UI. The UI is, I think, going to be greatly helped by this approach. We'll find out. Let's work from the bottom to the top. So this is text default with child, right? So text is going to be a set of components, and with child is going to turn into children, right? So this is all of the child components. This is where we put children. And then this goes in like that. So this is the new way of doing like a text with multiple editable elements inside of it, which means that this then is with child and with children. So this actually goes up here, right? And this starts here. And then this goes above it. So these things are all gone. And this goes here with a comma. So we should end up with a node that has a score and the score thing inside of the text. And this is for the regular score. So regular score there. And everything's updating. Should reset when we do a new game. Does reset. So we haven't changed the behavior at all. This is so much better. This is so much better than what it used to be. And we still have actually what it used to be below this. So we spawn the node. Inside of the node, there's two elements. The first one is text. The second one is text with an editable span inside of it. Done. And this is what we had to do before. We had to spawn, and then I used with child to insert one, and then with children because I needed to put text with another child inside of it. Very much an improvement, in my opinion. So we get rid of this. This becomes children, and we get rid of that, but insert the exclamation point. And then stick it in here. That cleans up so much nicer. It's going to be so much better to do any UI stuff in workshops too, because I feel like one of the things that I felt like I really spent a lot of time explaining was like, okay, why do you need with child? Why do you need with children? Why do you need to do these things? Why do you need to put them in different places? We still don't have BSN, so like you'll notice that this score box and this high score box are basically the same code, and they could just be very slightly different. But it's not worth abstracting because there's only two of them, so it's just copied. That said, this score box here, high score box, those both go into this container like this, which can also get a children. Right, score and high score are both the IDs here. Hopefully the IDs count. I don't actually know if they do because we didn't check. Right, node and children is IDs. So the question here is, does that not implement? So the IDs are not bundleable here, which is interesting. So our option is move both of them in here, or is there another option? Mesh extraction 0.16 milestone. This is improved spawn APIs. Here's a function that is used to return a bundle. So we can impl bundle now, which is very cool. So maybe we do that. That feels directionally correct for what we want to actually do here. Right, so we've got, in this case, it says button. This is score box. And what do we want to do here? What's different about these two things? The text span here actually doesn't matter. It's just like a useful debugging label. And then the component. So like we could pass in a variant here. We could pass in a number of other things here. We could do text and if I was going to do this, I would do like scorebox type, right? But it does feel a little bit weird to pass it in like that. Right? Like this could impl bundle. Potentially have extra. Now, I've never written a function like this before, so we're learning this on the fly together, just to be clear about what exactly is happening. So we end up with this. The font doesn't come from anywhere, so the font has to come in. And font is a handle to a font, I think. So that's this. I guess technically we could remove that. Adding a font is not a terribly large like lift, and I think it makes things look better. So extra and text. So we would do text here, right? And probably let the caller construct this. So just be explicit that, hey, this is supposed to be a string when you pass it in. And then score display is going to be the other one. So extra would just go here because it's technically a bundle. And then does that work for us? Is that what we called that? I think did I call something scorebox? No, I didn't. So we're good. I didn't use this, so that's fine. So this would be scorebox, and we would have score, right? And .toString, font, handle.clone, and I guess let's say unit for the moment. We will have two of them, right? So it'll be like this and high score. What did I say for high score? High score is best. And then we've got best score display and score display, which hopefully doesn't give us any issues. So you can see that we've got two sets of buttons here, best on the left and score and best on the right. That's because these are no longer, I think, even necessary there. And we've got score and best. And they both still work. And now we've got like, it's not like a great widget abstraction, but it does let us say, hey, we have a score box here with a node and some stuff in it. Here are the things that this thing requires. And I wonder if there's some kind of like into widget trait that would make sense there. Because now we're basically saying, okay, command spawn node with 2 score boxes, right? Score box container is here, which is added as a child here. So this spawn gets children, and children here is just 2048 with the font, followed by the score box container and the new game button, which we can't insert there as entities. So I'll leave them for a second. This is the new game button. This is the score box container. Score box container could go like this, right? We almost don't even need to do anything like that. So it's pretty obvious that there's 2048 and then like this node. And then it's a little bit awkward to like shove this stuff in. I think observers specifically don't have relationship support yet. So we end up with, where's the PR? I think this doesn't work yet. I think observers spawn doesn't exist. I think the relationships there haven't been implemented at the moment. Let's, I guess, check that to make sure. Right? No spawn here. Spawn is actually what, the relationship type? Right, spawn. And this is impl spawnable list. The spawnable list is where that spawn function comes from. I guess we could implement spawnable list. It's already implemented for a bunch of tuples, for a vex, for spawn iter, and stuff like that. What is spawn with? Spawn with parent. That could work. That could be a decent workaround for adding the observer. The first thing to do is definitely pull these in to their own children. And this comes through here. I love the way all of this UI is just like collapsing. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So spawn node with children, new game button. And then we've got this observer. The observer is on this specific button. But another common pattern for observers is actually using global observers instead of local. I think that teaching the global pattern might actually just be better. I think people intuitively understand the how do I frame this? People intuitively understand the local ability to do this, right? So like add observer. And then this is a trigger on click, right? And we would need to query for the button that we care about. So this would be scorebox. This is node button. You know, we didn't label this. So we would want to probably label the button. Right, new game button here. And then up here, we query for new game buttons. It doesn't actually matter which one. So I think unit or like with this. New game button doesn't exist. We need to create it. It's a little awkward to be querying for unit, but buttons.get will then tell us whether we have pointer clicked the right button. And it concerns me a little bit to do the question mark here because the question mark shouldn't fail. This is none, right? Is error. And we just want to silently return if you're clicking on something that doesn't have the button. So if we run this, let's make sure our button still works. This is the new game button specifically. So, right, play some game, click on some random stuff. We didn't like mess anything up. End, new, right? End, new. The reason I want to move this to a global observer is partially because global observers are, when we talk about performance, we were talking about performance earlier, global observers are generally speaking the more performant option compared to local observers. I think that the general feeling is that global observers should be the default. So I want to teach global observers as the default rather than local as the default, which is what I had before. Now that we've had a full cycle of people like using them and seeing how people, you know, mistakenly use them and whatever, this pattern specifically where you query for something with components and then check to see if it's the right thing is definitely a common pattern at this point. So it's worth teaching that pattern. And then that also removes a problem for us down here where the observers aren't, like observers spawn doesn't exist yet. There's no impl for related for observers. I think that's still in a PR. Right? Because there's spawn related. This is the more generic version. I think that this is not implemented for, like, observers don't have relationships yet. We're still waiting for many-to-many relationships for that to be possible. So that's just it. That's the way it is for the moment. So the new game button can go away too. And then this also goes here. And like the question starts to become how much is too much to stick into that children vec. But what I will say is if you consider this to be the start of our UI code, we've got a score box with which is a function that returns a bundle, which is what people expect to be able to do. That returns some structure that represents like a score box for us. And then we have setup UI, which spawns in a node that fits the entire size of the screen with some children. We've got 2048, which is some text. We've got a node that has 2 score boxes in it, and we have a node that has, you know, a new game button and some other junk in it. So like this to me is significantly more understandable in terms of UI code. I think that more people will probably be okay with writing this compared to what it was previously, which is nice. Score box, in terms of where it is in the code, probably below this. Button interaction system, we're using picking interaction here. I think picking interaction is still the right thing to use because that tells us whether something is hovered or not. It's a little bit awkward because we do like this gigantic match, but we do have to do this match either way anyway. We can either do like nested matches or whatever, but all of the values are different anyway. So I think I'm okay with that. Button text system seems okay in general. We covered that earlier. The children spawning stuff seems much better. I think that those are all of the things that have really changed for 2048. Right? Projection orthographic changed. We are now building up Vex here. I mean, this could probably be even just tiles. I don't think this map has the bundle issue. Or the board issue, sorry. What's wrong with tiles? Vec of, can we underscore this? We can. Probably what I would go with because we're returning bundles and I don't really want to type the whole bundle. So everything still works. If we're going to do that, we can probably just do that in line. But I don't want to push people into getting back into that other situation. So at this point, we've eliminated the allocation stuff that we were talking about earlier. We do effectively one allocation here. So we don't need to do with capacity. We don't need to introduce those APIs. And collect is something that people should be familiar with regardless. So we kind of like groove the thing that they should be doing rather than the thing that they're used to doing with the for loops. I feel like it's children spawn makes sense. I feel like children should be able to just accept that as a macro, but maybe there's a reason it doesn't. Because it treats everything as a child. So it's not an array of children. But I think generally speaking, this is fine. The other thing, so I guess we're done with the like children refactor, right? Bevy 0.16, we'll push that up. So that's up for anybody that wants to look at it. One of the reasons that we did a custom command for tile spawns is because we couldn't do the children stuff. How many places do we actually use spawn tile? We use spawn tile here and we use spawn tile here. So it's mildly useful to have that abstraction still. Right? Like we've got two places in which we spawn tile. Spawn tile takes a position that it's supposed to spawn at, and the points that it's supposed to spawn with. And then it handles grabbing the board, grabbing the asset server, loading the font, and spawning the actual thing here. This could then be, I guess, just a regular function, right? Function that returns bundle. Now, without collect, we have an iterator. Cannot this iterator be used directly in children? Yes. The issue is if we use the iterator in children, then we are encapsulating board, and we're triggering people to run into the like board being moved into that closure issue, which I don't think they'll understand how to fix. So I'm specifically avoiding that. The iterator wasn't the problem. The thing I was trying to avoid was throwing people into a pit of closure capturing environment for people who aren't ready to reason about that yet. If we make this a function, we do have to use, we have to pass in board, pass in the font. I don't think you can pass the, what do you mean by pass the iterator to children without closure? Oh, you mean, yeah, but that still has the same issue, right? Because iterators are lazy. Right. We're collecting here, which solves the issue because everything is done here after this piece of code. If we don't collect here, right, this is no longer a vec. This is an iterator now, right? So this is an iterator item sprite transform. I guess we did map there, but this is the spawn iter tiles. I don't think this will work, and I don't think it'll work for the same reason. Let's qualify this for the moment, not import it. Right. So now you run into the same issue, but you run into it in a completely different place. Which isolating it is probably good, right? Like making it clear that it's like this map and the board inside of the map. But it is the same issue as before, right? It's the same code effectively. So if somebody wants to do that, I think that's great. Right? If somebody goes, oh, but why can't we just use the iterator here? And they want to like side quest to put that iterator into spawn iter and like do that. I think that's great. It's a great learning opportunity. I don't think I want to force it. Right? Because if you do this closure and you just clone the board outside of it and you pass the clone reference in, then not the clone reference, but you pass the clone value in, then everything's fine, right? It can go and live with the closure and it's all good. But I think this is the approach that I want to go with. Spawn tiles. I know we have two spawn functions here. So spawn tiles runs on enter. I think there's spawn tile. No, I must have gotten rid of that. There was at one point in the past. So I think that this is fine. We do have an abstraction here. Like we do want the abstraction, and I think that the command is the right abstraction to use. Like we do want to spawn two tiles here, and we also want to spawn tiles here, and we want to do the same thing in both places. I don't want to copy the code. There isn't really a great way to do that without encapsulating it, because it does use board, it does use font. But at the point that I'm spawning this, I don't want to have to care about board and font. So I think the custom command is the right way to abstract this still. New tile handler triggers on new tile event. Do we need new tile event? We only use it in one place. I think that this extra logic says yes. I think that if you look at this at the surface level, it might feel weird that we have yet another spawn function. But these spawn functions are picking different numbers of tiles to spawn in different places. So we've got spawn tile there. And the other spawn tile is in testing, spawn tiles, and new tile handler. So spawn tiles. Basically, I guess we could fire two spawn tile events, right? It's not really like better per se. Right? Like this should still work. Would get rid of one rand location. And new game. Kind of hilarious that Rust Analyzer thinks that spawn tile is a problem. Is it actually? Did I need spawn tile event? Man, it's VS Code is really saving slow. Right? Like it's new tile event, right? And then we theoretically wouldn't need board here. This would just be spawning tiles to start the game. Rust Analyzer is like really slow, or I don't know if it's Rust Analyzer. I don't know if it's VS Code. Something is really like not saving the file right away. It's happened a couple times over the last week. So this is another option. I actually think I like this option more now that observers have been around longer. Right? So now we're triggering new tile event. New tile event handles spawning a tile in a random location. Spawn tile, the command, almost doesn't need to exist. Right, we're queuing a spawn tile here. This is in new tile handler for the new tile event. And then the other place we queue, actually, is it just the test in there now? I think it is. So spawn tile is used in the test. This is the test for spawning into arbitrary locations. And then it's also in new tile handler. So I can actually get rid of impl command if I want to. There's now not really a reason for it to exist. right? Because if we take this, we comment out command, we comment out spawn tile, and then this is responsible here. But this spawns at a specific position. Which is fine, actually. So that would go here. Enter. Get rid of that. So pause, pause, pause. Points to. And then font is something that isn't currently in this, so just comment that out for a second. And then the only issue is that that was really helpful for our test down here. Because otherwise we can't control the points. Pretty much unrelated, but to marshal events in case 2, similar events following each other is the same as one event. The marshalling is only doable in a system and just taking the last event. To marshal events, you don't mean like the go, marshal, unmarshal. You mean debounce? Like, if events are coming in, multiple of them, and you only want to handle the most recent one inside of 300 milliseconds, or the most recent one this frame or something like that, like one per frame. Is that what you're asking? I think one per frame. Anytime you want to skip events like that, I think the only thing that you can do is an event writer, an event reader. Anytime you want to work with the whole batch of events. Observers only allow you to work with individual events. So you kind of have to handle every event. Handling both would still be okay, but not optimized. Yeah, so if you want to skip events, I think the best way to do that is to use the event reader. And then basically read iter last. Because observers don't allow you to do that. Observers will make you handle everything. That might change in the future. I don't know that it will. So the question here is, spawn tile useful enough to get rid of the command impl? I don't know that we're really gaining anything here. Yes, technically we can throw in a spawn here. Yes, technically, like, we're always spawning in response to one of these new tile events. And because it's an observer, it happens basically immediately. Like, we could flow this through and have new tile events be something that carries like a position and a points with the default. I don't like that either. I think I like having the command. Because the other option is basically the only way you can interact with this from a testing perspective is by calling new tile handler. New tile handler will always return a points value of 2. So then you need to new tile handler and predefine a game that ends and execute all of the commands. So I think that this getting rid of the impl command is not worth it, is what I think. spawn tiles is really interesting because now it's just triggering 2 tiles. Game reset only sets the score to 0. Maybe we don't need 2 systems there. Right? It's the only place we use spawn tiles. So like we could get rid of spawn tiles entirely and do game reset. Because now this is like almost not worth keeping around. Right? It is kind of nice to have different systems for this. But honestly, this is just as good. I think we're going to get rid of the extra system. I don't think the ordering matters all that much either. One of the other thoughts that I've had in the past about 2048 is that while it seems like a simple game, a lot of the logic is actually like dealing finagly with like the individual tiles to the point where most of this workshop is actually setting up the board in the way to work. So there's a lot of things that are very simple here, and then the board shift like turns into something that's just awkward no matter how you write it. You end up dealing with like a bunch of indices, and like the way to deal with 2048 board shifts is to code one of them and then rotate it for the other 3. So I think that in particular makes this kind of awkward. But to the point of, I think explaining the way the board works is going to be shorter lessons. Right? Like a board shift, the logic inside of here, I think can be kind of skipped over because it's not really the big important thing. If you can't tell, I'm trying to like reduce the size of these workshops overall conceptually, like in the number of concepts introduced and the number of pieces of code to write, etc. Merge spawn tiles and game reset. So I think this is good. I think this is good enough. I think I'm much happier with the UI stuff. All of these are background color. And then we don't handle it for startup. I don't know. Maybe I'll rewrite this match. This match just feels a little bit awkward. I think Pressed, hovered. It's kind of organized by picking interaction right now, and it could be organized via like button type, which I think is a better organization. But yeah. Okay. So 0.16 I think is ready to go. I don't think like the way that I write this match is really that important in the grand scheme of things. Using picking interaction for this I think is very important. The children stuff is very important, right? Making sure that this kind of function impl bundle abstraction is known is very important. Pickable ignore is very interesting from a, like, if you click on the text versus click on the button kind of thing. Scoreboard updates are fine. Button interaction system is fine. Text system is fine. Impl board is just kind of like a consequence of choosing 2048. Log transitions is always fun to know about. I think render tiles is something that sometimes I question. Maybe I'll think a little bit more about that. This has, like, the tiles have to move at some point. Maybe I'll leave myself a note here. That's to do. There we go. Animation clips. Animation clips instead of Bevy easing. And thus take another look at render tiles, because that'll affect how that function runs. One of the interesting things that 2048 does is it cuts the animation short if you push arrows fast enough, which could be an interesting thing. I think the other thing about 2048 is this ordering of systems. If I can scroll to it, this ordering of systems specifically is very important. Like, this is the, this is what needs to happen whenever you press something in the game, like board shift, update the points, update the tiles, check to see if the game should end or not. User input, yada, 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 right? So actually, this is board shift, right? Actually, I feel like this almost shouldn't run an update. And this should be an example of how to run like a schedule, which I think we have run schedule now, right? Right. Run the corresponding schedule label. So run foo schedule. In which case, does this have an example of setting up a custom? No, I think, what file are we in? Commands. Run schedule. Calls world run schedule. Is this custom transitions? Yeah, derive schedule label, whatever, on re-exit. This is state transition stuff, which is not really what we want. So you get app state, identity transitions plugin for app state, on enter, on exits. This doesn't really add the things that I wanted to see added. It's kind of tied up in state transition logic, and I don't want any of that. Where's our schedules? I guess this doesn't really show schedules. I feel like update running all the time to accept user input, and then the schedule being run when that happens makes the most sense. That would also imply like being able to interrupt the schedule. Well, that's not true. It would imply the rendering of the tiles easing across the screen was interruptible, which would be animation clip stuff, which would mean that we could effectively like reset the animation by moving the transform and everything should be fine. So I think that that's another thing. Did I write that down already? What did I write down for the to-do? I think this could be a really good candidate to introduce things like run schedule. And then this workshop becomes more about run schedule than it does about anything else. The board logic is, I don't want to say skipped, but explained and not walked through. The UI logic similarly can be explained and not walked through because it's a little bit more understandable now. Which actually, all that together shortens the workshop quite a bit. I think I like all of that. I like those changes. See, I'm logged in over here. Scene is at 50 stars. Huzzah! 2 forks. Who forked it? Snake, I think I'm going to leave for a second. The current version of Snake depends on Bevy ECS tile map, and it does that because it basically uses the same board system as 2048, but it's really weird to constantly re-implement the board system when there are tile maps that exist, especially with the kind of tile map that Bevy ECS tile map is, where it basically gives us all of the logic that in 2048 we implement manually. Flappy Bird we could update. I think there's a couple of workshops that need to be updated like this. What time is it? 10:43. Let's take a look at this first. My guess is that this update is not that big of a deal. Unless we like used avian and stuff. Bevy asset loader, I think, has an RC release. Transform interpolation noise 15.1. Start off with bumping the Rust edition to 2024. Background material is a shader. Shader's cool. Canvas size. Canvas size. Yeah, I guess we do that, don't we? Okay. So let's run this to make sure that we have the right stuff. Animate sprite. Corgi control. Despawn pipes, check collisions, trigger endgame. We're not really doing anything for endgames and points at the moment. This is a demo that I actually ended up using for a Game Boy Advance game. Gravity, I think we implemented ourselves, right? We're not using... Yeah, we're not using avian or anything like that. Have a good one, Roberto. Thanks for hanging out. I think I'm about to wrap up stream anyway. It's getting to be go eat lunchtime. Yeah, yada. What are we at here? 40 of 98. So this is going to be some of the work that I do over the next week or so. I'm going to try to update this. I think I'm going to update asteroids as well. So this asteroids 2048 snake. I think there's one or two others. The Bevy examples are already updated. There's a PR up for any of the examples that were live in 0.15. I want to actually turn that into something more of a progression. So the Bevy examples repo is this one. Let's go to code. I want to update the README, but there's a bunch of things like this dissolve shader, this vertex shader stuff, this creative coding thing, candy canes as a storage buffer usage, a bunch of things like that. I did the 0.16 upgrades. There is a bug for the dissolve shader. The shadow doesn't show, but otherwise this is pretty up to date. I want to start turning this examples folder into more of a ordered, how do you learn how to write shaders in Bevy? How do you learn how to do different things in Bevy kind of resource? I started that with 0.14 to 15, and I want to just increase that effect. So that's my goal for 0.16, to start actually putting those into something that is something I can point people to who are like, how do I get started in shaders? Or how do I get started doing whatever? And have those be basically example based. And then I'll throw those on Rust Adventure with videos and explanations. And then people should be able to just go through that and actually learn how to do things. And it'll help because there'll be very specific. Oh, I don't have. Go up. There we go. So we do have everything working here like this. The parallax, I think, adds a lot to it. So not too much going on here. Probably worth cleaning up. Probably worth, I don't know. Like I'm 50-50 on web builds for all these workshops. I think that building for the web adds some specific complexity that, like, it would be nice for all of these to be up and running and deployed. But I don't know that it makes sense to constantly cover, here's how you do a WASM deployment. I think that's a specific workshop. Have a good one, Anders. Okay, so let's try to bump this, I guess. Asset loader has a release. Transform interpolation. I feel like a transform interpolation doesn't. Somebody just started smacking a pole outside my door, so. Bevy transform interpolation. Drop in transform interpolation. This is 0.1 still, 0.15 repository. I think this is, there is a release candidate. Perfect. Let's keep it. I like this library in general. I think it's a useful point of, hey, this is a way you can do things and should do things. One of the things a lot of people miss is the fixed update time step stuff, because it's easy to ignore. Let's do a revision to this revision, copy. Wait, I didn't even check if there was a release. Is there the release? I just kind of went straight for the repo. Yeah, no published release candidate, so. Update, no standard compatible. Yes, let's go. RC.2, asset loader. Is asset loader published? I don't think so. The repo is up to date. Rename finally a net resource. That's 0.15. This is from December. It's the wrong branch. I think Bevy main is the branch they use. Bevy asset loader equals, that's not version, that's git equals asset loader.git, rev equals this, rev here, copy, paste, and then this should run. Well, I don't know if it'll have no issues, but it should at least compile. Swash. What do I remember Swash from? Swash is like SVG stuff, isn't it? Swash. Open type. Swash is font stuff. That's why I thought it was related to SVG stuff. Shaping and scaling. Font stuff is so complicated. So I think that I'll probably script all of these out and then do like a really heavy recording day whenever the release candidate actually or not the release candidate, whenever the stable release actually drops, which will probably be a week or two from now. Which should line up pretty well. I really need to reboot my computer. I'm running probably like 10 to 15 instances of Rust Analyzer. I usually have like Photoshop open constantly, DaVinci open whenever I'm editing videos. I just closed it this morning. Ableton is something that I've been keeping open lately. What else? Sprite is currently open. I've got 3 different browsers open. Why do I have 3 browsers open? I know why I have 3 browsers open. I can actually close Firefox. Firefox can go away. I like some of the vibe of Zen in terms of the display here. This is the display that I really liked from Arc before Arc forgot what they were doing and forgot to build a browser. But it fits so much nicer without the window Chrome into a layout. So when I'm talking about stuff, it makes so much more sense for me to display it in a browser like Zen than in any other browser. Perfect. Invalid bundle. That's interesting. Oh, right. This requires the 2D feature. I knew that because I just stared it in the face here, and then I forgot to do it. That's how that works. Do you really need that all in one line? Maybe I shouldn't do it like that then. Okay, so we've got bundle issues with the camera 2D. Camera 2D. That's the orthographic projection. We know how to fix that already. Projection, orthographic. Done. And then what else do we have? The game just runs. Cool. So 0.15 to 0.16 update is complete for Flappy Corgi. That's so wild. 0.15 to 0.16 I feel like is one of the least breaking updates in a while. There's been a lot of like big changes over the last few updates. And I just like when I update things for 0.16, I find myself repeatedly finding that all of my applications just work for the most part, which is just really cool. We need a barrier on that fall. So this game actually needs a little bit more work. Let's get rid of despawn recursive here because we don't need it. And then index is unused. Score is never read. I think that's it. This is done. Git commit 0.16. Let's check for spawns and children's. I don't think I have any like nested stuff in this example. Pipes are a special command right now. Is that because of children? Kind of. It's because we're using noise and time to do the spawning of the pipes for real. But this can also be pipe top. Points gates. Pipe bottom. Then this whole thing goes away. So now we've got these sprites that are composed of basically multiple sections. And this should all still work. Cool. I still think there's some cleanup to do in terms of how this all works, but I'm okay with that for now. The scrolling background is really easy, which is really cool because it's like, okay, you want a background to scroll, sample it, and scale the X value. Like use time, scale time, get the speed, and the whole background parallaxes, which is just really cool. Canvas size 480 by 270. I don't really know why I made it like that. I think the sprites that I have are that small. I think that's why I made it like that. And then for the most part, everything else is good to go. I think we got rid of avian and we went to non-avian. That's why there's a bunch of collider stuff scattered around here. And then image settings default nearest. Is that something that we actually need? Not really. That's not the way we do that anymore either. Interesting. Commit. Push this up. I'm just going to push that to main because there's really not that much difference between the two, even though it is 0.16. Okay, so we got 2048, we got Flappy Bird updated. There's a couple more things that I want to update, but it's getting to be lunchtime for me. So I'm going to stop the stream there, and I will see the rest of you, I think, on Saturday. I have to check what I'm doing Friday night, but have a good rest of your day, everyone. This Week in Bevy is out already, so if you have not seen it, go watch it, and I'll see you in the next one.